Most people think wealth is about knowing what to do. They imagine billionaires as people who have discovered some secret strategy, some hidden market, or some inside connection that others simply don't have access to. But they're wrong. The truth is brutally simple. Wealth, real wealth, doesn't come from what you know. It comes from how you think. There's a psychological architecture to success, an inner framework that dictates how you act, how you risk, and how you respond to loss and opportunity. The rule that made me a billionaire wasn't written in any business book or whispered in a boardroom. It was born from the constant tension between fear and confidence, between hesitation and flow. When I began, I didn't understand this. I was obsessed with results. I thought if I could just find the perfect move, the right investment, the right timing, I'd finally break through. I measured progress in dollars, not in discipline. Every win inflated me, every loss crushed me. My emotions were my market indicators, and I let them control me. The irony, of course, is that markets, like life, punish emotion. They reward detachment, clarity, and consistency. It took me years of failure to understand that the real battlefield was internal. The rule I eventually discovered had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with state of mind. It's a rule that governs how you engage with uncertainty. Most people don't realize that uncertainty is the only constant. You can't predict what will happen next in business, in trading, in relationships, in life. But what you can predict and control is your response. That's where the separation happens between those who chase and those who create, between those who survive and those who thrive. The difference is psychological. The rule that made me a billionaire was simple but absolute. I stopped needing to know what would happen next. I stopped needing to be right. I focused instead on building a mindset that could handle anything. Once that shift happened, everything changed. My decisions became fluid. I no longer hesitated when opportunity appeared or panicked when it disappeared. My sense of identity detached from outcomes. I began to see every move, every decision as a probability, not a promise. I learned to execute without attachment, to act without fear, to trust my edge even when results were uncertain. That mental freedom created a chain reaction. Better choices, consistent results, exponential growth. The rule transformed not only my business, but my perception of success itself. It's not glamorous and it's not easy. But once you internalize it, once you truly understand that the outcome doesn't define you, that the only thing that matters is how you engage with risk, then wealth becomes inevitable. You stop playing the game to win. You start playing because you understand the game. That's the difference. That's the rule. Wealth follows mindset, not strategy. This is the fundamental truth that most people never grasp, and it's the reason so many intelligent, skilled, and even hardworking individuals never break through into real abundance. They spend their lives chasing strategies, new systems, new markets, new opportunities, thinking that the next big thing will finally unlock the door. But they fail to understand that every strategy, no matter how powerful or precise, is executed through the filter of the mind. The results you create in life are not determined by what you know, but by how you think, how you perceive, and how you respond. Your mindset is the invisible infrastructure that shapes every decision, every reaction, every pattern of behavior. Without the right internal framework, even the best strategies collapse under the weight of emotional distortion. When you study people who achieve extraordinary success, what separates them isn't necessarily intelligence or resources. It's their psychological composition, the way they interpret pressure, uncertainty, and loss. The average person seeks comfort. They want guarantees. They want to act only when they're certain they'll win, but that desire for certainty is what keeps them trapped in mediocrity, because every real opportunity exists beyond the boundary of the known. A mindset that depends on comfort can never create freedom. The wealthy understand this intuitively. They've conditioned their minds to operate effectively in uncertainty, to see chaos as possibility, and to act decisively without emotional interference. Mindset defines how you process both success and failure. Two people can experience the same loss. One sees it as proof of inadequacy, the other as feedback for growth. One retreats, the other refines. Over time, that difference compounds. The person with a reactive mindset builds patterns of avoidance, hesitation, and doubt. The person with a growth-oriented mindset develops resilience, adaptability, and strategic confidence. This compounding effect is why mindset always outweighs strategy. Because strategy exists in the external world, but mindset governs your ability to use it. A flawed mindset will sabotage even the most proven system, while a strong mindset can turn even simple methods into empires. Wealth is not an event. It's a pattern of thinking sustained over time. It's the byproduct of thousands of micro decisions made with clarity, conviction, and emotional neutrality. People who chase strategies are looking for shortcuts, formulas that remove the need for emotional control. They want success without uncertainty, progress without discomfort. But this is a psychological contradiction. Every opportunity carries risk, and risk demands an emotional price. Until you learn to manage that price internally, you'll continue to self-sabotage. The wealthiest individuals have learned to stay composed while everyone else reacts. They've trained their minds to interpret risk through logic, not fear. A strong mindset is not something you're born with. It's built through exposure and awareness. It begins by understanding how your thoughts shape your reality. Every belief you hold acts as a lens through which you interpret the world. If you believe money is scarce, you'll unconsciously behave in ways that limit your opportunities. If you believe success belongs to others, you'll create patterns that reinforce that story. The mind doesn't just observe reality, it constructs it. That's why changing strategy without changing mindset rarely works. You can switch industries, partners, or tactics, but if your underlying beliefs remain rooted in scarcity, fear, or doubt, the same results will repeat themselves in a different form. When you operate from the right mindset, your relationship with opportunity transforms. You stop casing and start attracting. You begin to see patterns others miss because your perception is no longer clouded by emotion. You start trusting your process, not your impulses. This trust allows you to make decisions quickly and consistently, which is the hallmark of every successful person. The wealthy don't waste time second-guessing themselves. They don't get paralyzed by analysis or fear of being wrong. Their mental framework is designed to handle being wrong, to adapt instantly, and to move forward with precision. This kind of mental efficiency is what amplifies every strategy they touch. Another crucial aspect of mindset is self-image, the internal identity you hold about who you are and what you deserve. Your external results will always align with your internal self-concept. If you see yourself as limited, you'll unconsciously make decisions that confirm that limitation. If you see yourself as capable, resilient, and deserving of wealth, your behavior will naturally align with that perception. The wealthy invest heavily in shaping their identity because they understand that the mind doesn't execute what it doesn't believe. Belief precedes behavior, and behavior creates results. Changing how you see yourself is the most powerful strategic move you can make because it changes how you interpret and respond to everything that happens. A poor mindset seeks validation. A wealthy mindset seeks growth. A poor mindset wants to be right. The wealthy mindset wants to evolve. This subtle difference affects every choice. When you're driven by validation, you fear mistakes because they threaten your sense of worth. When you're driven by growth, mistakes are neutral. They're simply data. That detachment gives you immense power. It allows you to stay calm while others panic, focus while others react. It allows you to see opportunity in failure and momentum in stillness. This psychological balance is what sustains long-term wealth creation. Without it, even temporary success becomes unstable. Your environment will always mirror your mindset. People with scarcity mindsets surround themselves with comfort, familiarity, and safety. They value predictability over potential. People with wealth mindsets cultivate environments that challenge them. They expose themselves to new ideas, high performers, and uncomfortable truths. They understand that growth cannot happen inside the same patterns of thought that created mediocrity. Every external upgrade begins with an internal upgrade. That's why the wealthy spend more time developing self-awareness, mastering emotional control, and refining their perception than chasing the next tactic or trend. At its core, mindset is about how you interpret control. Most people try to control outcomes. They waste energy trying to manipulate external circumstances, markets, or people. The wealthy focus on controlling themselves, their thoughts, their focus, their reactions. They know the only true control lies within. By mastering that internal domain, they create stability in unstable environments. They don't need the world to cooperate to succeed. This independence is what makes them powerful. They can operate confidently in chaos because their foundation isn't external, it's psychological. Every major breakthrough in wealth creation begins when you stop asking, what should I do? And start asking, who do I need to become? The first question looks outward, the second turns inward. The answer is never found in a new method or market, but in transforming the mental patterns that dictate how you think, feel, and act. When your mindset aligns with abundance, resilience, and clarity, every strategy you apply gains leverage. It's no longer about finding the perfect plan. It's about becoming the kind of person who can execute any plan with precision, confidence, and consistency. Wealth then stops being something you chase and becomes something you embody. Master uncertainty instead of fearing it. That single shift separates those who rise exponentially from those who remain paralyzed in cycles of hesitation and regret. Uncertainty is not an obstacle to success. It is the environment in which success exists. Every great opportunity, every defining moment, every leap forward in wealth or achievement lives on the other side of the unknown. The difference between those who capitalize on it and those who avoid it lies entirely in how they relate to uncertainty. Most people spend their lives trying to eliminate it, to build walls of predictability around their choices, to seek comfort and control. But control is an illusion. The more you cling to it, the less power you actually have. Mastery begins when you stop trying to predict outcomes and start training your mind to perform in the absence of guarantees. From the moment we begin pursuing success, we are conditioned to believe that certainty equals safety. We are taught to plan, to calculate, to forecast. But in reality, nothing can be truly predicted. Not the market, not timing, not people's behavior, not even our own emotions in the heat of a moment. The wealthy don't waste time fighting this truth. They accept it completely. They build mental frameworks that allow them to operate fluidly in environments that others perceive as risky. To them, uncertainty is not danger, it's information. It's a signal that something new is emerging, something that hasn't been exploited yet. They understand that if a path feels entirely safe, it's already saturated, already too late. The presence of uncertainty is often the clearest indicator of opportunity. The human mind is wired to resist the unknown. It seeks patterns, it craves familiarity, it wants to avoid pain. This instinct was essential for survival when danger meant physical threat. But in the modern world, that same instinct limits growth. Fearing uncertainty causes people to freeze, overanalyze, or retreat just when they should be advancing. The moment you understand that your fear of uncertainty is not truth but programming, you begin to regain control. You start to see that uncertainty is not the enemy. It is the field where skill, discipline, and mindset are tested. The goal is not to remove uncertainty, but to condition yourself to function optimally within it. This conditioning begins with awareness. Every time you feel hesitation, you are confronting a moment of uncertainty. Most people try to rationalize that feeling away. They wait for more information, more clarity, more proof. But the most valuable decisions in life rarely come with proof. They come with instinct sharpened by experience and executed through confidence. The wealthy understand that perfection is an illusion. They know waiting for certainty means missing momentum. Their decisions are not based on guarantees, they are based on probabilities. And probabilities by nature exist within uncertainty. To master uncertainty, you must redefine your relationship with risk. Risk is simply exposure to the unknown. The average person experiences it as fear, the wealthy experience it as leverage. They don't gamble blindly. They measure their exposure, manage their psychology, and act decisively when the odds are favorable. This ability ability to act despite ambiguity comes from detachment, not recklessness. They know that outcomes are never fully within their control, but execution always is. That distinction changes everything. It allows them to move with clarity while others hesitate in confusion. Mastery over uncertainty is emotional discipline in its purest form. The reason most people lose in volatile situations is not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack composure. When uncertainty rises, emotions surge. Fear, doubt, greed, anxiety. These emotions distort perception, leading to impulsive choices or complete inaction. The wealthy train themselves to remain neutral. They experience the same uncertainty as everyone else, but their internal dialogue is different. Where others ask, what if it goes wrong? They ask, how do I adapt if it does? That simple reframe turns uncertainty from paralysis into preparation. It transforms anxiety into readiness. The more you expose yourself to uncertainty, the more resilient you become. Just like physical strength develops through resistance, psychological strength develops through discomfort. Avoiding uncertainty weakens the mind, embracing it sharpens it. Each experience becomes data, each challenge a lesson in adaptability. Over time, your nervous system learns that uncertainty isn't fatal. It becomes a normal part of your operating environment. This is the state of flow that elite performers live in, the ability to function at peak capacity without needing perfect conditions. Mastering uncertainty also requires detaching from the need for immediate validation. When you take action in uncertain territory, results often come slowly or unpredictably. Most people can't tolerate that delay. They crave reassurance that they're on the right path, and when they don't get it, they retreat. But progress under uncertainty rarely looks linear. It often feels chaotic before clarity emerges. The wealthy understand this rhythm. They don't measure success by how things feel in the moment. They measure it by how consistently they execute their process despite the unknown. That consistency creates compound results that appear sudden to outsiders, but are actually the product of sustained composure over time. Uncertainty exposes weaknesses in mindset. It reveals how much faith you truly have in yourself, your vision, and your capacity to adapt. When you fear uncertainty, you're really doubting your ability to handle what might happen. The wealthy invert that belief. They assume they can handle anything and act from that assumption. This self-trust is what allows them to move forward when others are frozen. It's not arrogance, it's preparation. They've rehearsed adversity mentally so thoroughly that when real uncertainty arrives, it feels familiar. Their calmness is not confidence in outcomes, but confidence in themselves. The process of mastering uncertainty is a psychological training ground. It forces you to separate emotion from logic, reaction from response. Every uncertain moment becomes an opportunity to practice detachment, to observe your fears without obeying them. Over time, you begin to see uncertainty differently, not as chaos, but as neutral space waiting for your interpretation. You realize that uncertainty doesn't cause failure, your reaction to it does. Once that awareness becomes instinct, uncertainty loses its power over you. It becomes background noise instead of the main narrative. In business, relationships, and personal growth, the ability to act decisively in uncertain conditions is the ultimate advantage. It allows you to seize opportunities before they become obvious, to adapt faster than competitors, and to maintain emotional stability while others unravel. This composure attracts trust, investment, and leadership because people gravitate toward those who can stay centered when the world feels unstable. Mastering uncertainty makes you a psychological in turbulent environments. Every decision in life carries risk. Every plan can fail. Every path has variables you cannot control. But the one thing always within your control is your state of mind. When your internal world remains stable regardless of external fluctuation, uncertainty becomes irrelevant. You begin to navigate it naturally, intuitively, almost effortlessly. That's the point where mastery begins, not when you eliminate uncertainty, but when it no longer controls your actions or emotions. It becomes the silent space in which your clarity expands and your results accelerate beyond anything predictable. Detach identity from outcomes. This single discipline determines the difference between emotional chaos and unshakable composure, between temporary success and enduring mastery. Most people live trapped inside an invisible loop where every win inflates their worth and every loss destroys it. Their identity rises and falls with their results, leaving them emotionally fragile and mentally reactive. The reason they never achieve consistent success isn't a lack of talent or opportunity. It's that their sense of self is chained to external outcomes. They measure who they are by what happens instead of understanding that what happens is only feedback about how they think, decide, and execute. To create real freedom, financial, emotional, or creative, you have to separate who you are from what you achieve. When your identity is attached to outcomes, every action becomes a test of your value. Success becomes validation, and failure becomes personal proof of inadequacy. This creates a constant state of psychological pressure where your decisions are motivated by fear instead of clarity. You stop taking rational risks because the possibility of failure feels like a threat to your self-worth. You become hesitant, overly cautious, or driven by the need to prove yourself. The wealthy, on the other hand, operate from a different frame. They see outcomes as neutral data. A win or loss doesn't define them, it informs them. Their identity is anchored in process, discipline, and adaptability, not in results. This detachment gives them an almost unfair advantage because they can act with precision and confidence while others are emotionally tangled in expectations. The moment you begin to see your outcomes as reflections of choices, not reflections of self, your power expands. You stop defending your ego and start improving your execution. The ego resists feedback because it equates being wrong with being lesser. But mastery requires constant feedback. It demands the humility to observe mistakes without judgment. Detaching identity from outcomes dismantles the ego's defenses and replaces emotional reaction with objective awareness. You start asking, what does this outcome reveal about my process? Instead of, what does this say about me? That single question reframes failure from something painful into something useful. Identity attachment is one of the biggest causes of inconsistency. When results are good, people feel powerful and confident. When results turn bad, they lose focus, motivation, and belief. They ride emotional highs and lows that distort judgment. This volatility creates impulsive decision-making, overconfidence in wins, panic in losses. The wealthy remain stable through both because their sense of worth isn't on the line. Their mindset is structured around control of behavior, not control of outcomes. They know they can't dictate results, but they can can always control discipline, focus, and effort. This inner stability allows them to perform consistently even in volatile environments. Detaching identity doesn't mean being emotionless. It means being emotionally balanced. It's about creating space between what happens and how you interpret it. The average person collapses those two things into one. If they fail, they feel like failures. If they succeed, they feel invincible. This emotional fusion blinds them to reality. The truth is that both success and failure are temporary feedback loops. They carry lessons, not definitions. The moment you internalize this, you stop needing constant reassurance from external validation. You stop chasing outcomes as a way to feel worthy and start pursuing mastery for its own sake. The wealthy understand that the real enemy isn't loss, it's attachment. When you need a particular result to feel secure or significant, you start forcing outcomes. You chase deals that don't align with your edge. You ignore data that contradicts your expectations. You hold on to failing positions because admitting defeat would feel like admitting weakness. This attachment is psychological quicksand. The more you struggle against it, the deeper it pulls you in. Detachment, on the other hand, creates freedom. It allows you to cut losses quickly, adapt instantly, and act objectively without emotional interference. Every major breakthrough requires letting go of control over how things must turn out. When you detach identity from outcomes, your focus shifts from performance anxiety to execution quality. You start optimizing your system instead of obsessing over results. You begin to understand that outcomes are lagging indicators. They reflect past actions, not current capability. This awareness keeps you anchored in the present moment where your actual power exists. You stop projecting fears or expectations into the future and start refining what's in front of you right now. This level of focus is what produces exponential growth over time. Most people struggle with detachment because their self-worth has been conditioned externally since childhood. They've been rewarded for achievements and punished for mistakes. Over years, that conditioning wires the brain to associate outcomes with identity. Undoing that conditioning requires awareness and repetition. You must deliberately separate feedback from self-image. When something goes wrong, train your mind to observe it neutrally. This happened. What can I learn? Instead of this happened. What's wrong with me? Over time, this practice rewires your emotional responses. You stop collapsing under pressure because failure no longer feels like an attack on who you are. The most successful individuals cultivate what can be called identity independence. Their confidence isn't conditional on external events. It's built internally on self-trust, discipline, and adaptability. They know who they are independent of performance. This grounded confidence gives them a psychological calmness that others misinterpret as arrogance. But it's not arrogance, it's neutrality. They're not attached to winning because they already feel complete without it. Ironically, this detachment makes them far more likely to win because they can think clearly, act efficiently, and recover instantly from setbacks. When your identity is fused with outcomes, you unconsciously create pressure to perform perfectly. Perfectionism then becomes a defense mechanism, an attempt to protect self-image. But perfectionism destroys growth. It makes you afraid to experiment, afraid to fail, afraid to look foolish. True growth demands imperfection. It requires the willingness to be wrong repeatedly until patterns become clear. Detachment dissolves perfectionism because it removes the emotional cost of being wrong. You become free to test, adapt, and learn without self-punishment. Every action becomes exploration instead of judgment. Detaching identity also changes how you experience success. When you're attached, success becomes addictive. You chase the emotional high of achievement because it validates you. But this addiction eventually leads to burnout because no amount of success can permanently fill the need for validation. Detachment transforms success into something sustainable. You appreciate it, but you're not dependent on it. You don't chase it for self-worth. You use it as information about what works. That mindset keeps you balanced during expansion and centered during decline. One of the most profound effects of detachment is the clarity it brings to decision making. When you're emotionally tied to an outcome, your decisions are biased. You see only what confirms your desired result. You ignore warning signs, exaggerate opportunities, and justify mistakes. When your identity is separate from results, you can look at data honestly. You can change direction without shame. You can admit error without emotional collapse. This honesty is the foundation of consistent growth because you're no longer defending ego, you're refining truth. Every situation in life offers you two paths: react from identity or respond from awareness. Reacting from identity means filtering everything through your need to be right, respected, or successful. Responding from awareness means seeing things as they are and acting according to reality. Detachment makes the second path natural. It creates psychological distance between you and the event, allowing observation before reaction. This small gap is where mastery lives, the space where emotion ends and precision begins. When you detach identity from outcomes, life becomes experimentation. You move from trying to prove yourself to trying to understand yourself. You stop resisting uncertainty because your self-worth is no longer threatened by it. You stop fearing mistakes because they no longer diminish you. You stop needing to control results because your value is no longer tied to them. What emerges is calm execution, consistent performance, and a mindset that thrives regardless of circumstance. Act without emotional interference. This principle is the cornerstone of all peak performance and long-term success, yet it's the hardest discipline to master. Most people believe that emotions are indicators of truth, that how they feel should dictate what they do. They act when they feel confident, retreat when they feel afraid, celebrate when things go right, and collapse when they go wrong. Their emotional state becomes the control center of their behavior, turning them into reactive participants rather than deliberate creators. The difference between those who achieve consistent success and those who remain stuck in cycles of inconsistency is that the former have learned to act independent of emotion. They don't suppress their feelings, they simply don't let those feelings decide for them. Emotions are energy. They are biological responses designed to help us survive, not succeed. Fear, excitement, excitement, frustration, greed, doubt, all are remnants of a system built for immediate reaction, not long-term vision. In modern environments where success depends on clarity, patience, and precision, emotional reactivity becomes a liability. The wealthy understand this deeply. They recognize that every major decision is distorted when filtered through emotion. Fear exaggerates risk, greed amplifies confidence, frustration narrows focus, and euphoria blinds judgment. Acting without emotional interference means maintaining mental stability no matter what emotional noise arises. It's about learning to see emotions for what they are, signals, not instructions. The ability to act without emotional distortion begins with awareness. Most people don't even realize when emotion is influencing their decisions. They confuse emotional intensity with intuition. But intuition is calm, quiet, and neutral. It comes from clarity, not chaos. Emotion, on the other hand, is loud and urgent. It demands immediate reaction. The first step in mastering emotional neutrality is recognizing the difference between impulse and insight. You must train yourself to pause before acting, to observe the emotional wave without riding it. This moment of pause creates distance between feeling and action, the space where conscious choice exists. The average person reacts to emotion automatically. They feel fear and pull back. They feel greed and overcommit. They feel anger and make impulsive corrections. This constant emotional oscillation keeps them trapped in inconsistency. In business, trading, leadership, or any competitive domain, that volatility is fatal. Emotional swings translate into inconsistent performance. You can't build momentum when every move is dictated by mood. The wealthy cultivate emotional discipline so their behavior remains steady regardless of internal or external fluctuations. Their mindset is built on process and probability, not emotion. Whether they feel fear or excitement, they execute the same way because their decisions are guided by structure, not sensation. Acting without emotional interference doesn't mean becoming robotic. It means operating from alignment rather than reaction. Emotion still exists, but it's observed instead of obeyed. This subtle difference changes everything. When you act from reaction, emotion drives your behavior. When you act from alignment, emotion becomes background noise. The wealthy know that emotions are temporary, but consequences are permanent. They wait for emotions to settle before deciding because they understand that emotional decisions rarely survive logical scrutiny. They built mental systems to evaluate choices based on data, probability, and long-term impact instead of immediate relief. To act without emotional interference, you must build what can be called emotional awareness infrastructure. This means knowing your emotional triggers, the patterns that consistently distort your judgment. Everyone has them: fear of loss, need for validation, impatience, greed, pride. These triggers hijack rational thinking the moment they're activated. The only way to disarm them is to observe them without resistance. The act of noticing emotion disempowers it. When you can name what you're feeling in real time, this is fear, this is frustration, this is excitement, you separate identity from emotion. You're no longer consumed by it, you're watching it. This perspective shift gives you control. Another critical aspect of emotional discipline is learning to trust the process over the feeling. The wealthy operate through systems and rules designed to override emotional bias. They know that in moments of stress or uncertainty, emotion will always try to hijack logic. Their antidote is structure. They build habits, strategies, and checklists that dictate their actions regardless of how they feel. These systems serve as emotional stabilizers, ensuring that decisions are made from consistency, not impulse. Following a process when emotions are strong feels unnatural because emotion demands movement. But restraint is a form of strength. Acting in alignment with your process rather than your emotion is how discipline compounds into mastery. Emotional interference is most dangerous in moments of high intensity. When stakes feel high, time feels short, and uncertainty feels overwhelming. These are the moments when the untrained mind collapses and the trained mind rises. The wealthy thrive in these situations because they've conditioned themselves to stay composed under pressure. They don't need calm circumstances to remain calm. Their focus doesn't fluctuate with the environment because they've built internal steadiness. This ability to maintain clarity in chaos is the ultimate competitive edge. While others freeze, they act with precision. While others panic, they adapt fluidly. Emotions distort perception of time. When you're angry or afraid, your mind exaggerates urgency. You feel the need to act immediately to relieve the tension. But immediate action under emotional stress usually leads to mistakes. Acting without emotional interference means learning to sit inside discomfort without reacting. It's about training your nervous system to tolerate tension without needing to escape it. This is where composure is built. Each time you resist emotional impulse, you strengthen your psychological endurance. Over time, emotions lose their ability to control you because your tolerance for discomfort expands beyond their influence. Detachment plays a vital role in emotional control. When you're overly attached to outcomes, emotions become amplified. Fear intensifies because failure feels personal. Greed spikes because success feels validating. Detachment neutralizes these extremes. It allows you to evaluate outcomes objectively instead of emotionally. The wealthy remain detached not because they don't care, but because they understand that caring too much about a specific result clouds judgment. Their care is directed toward process, not outcomes. This creates stability. They can lose and win with the same composure because their emotional equilibrium isn't dependent on the result. Emotional mastery also comes from reframing your relationship with uncertainty and loss. When you see loss as information instead of injury, emotion loses its charge. Fear fades when mistakes stop feeling fact. Acting without emotional interference becomes natural when you stop interpreting external events as personal reflections. The less personal your interpretation, the more logical your response. The wealthy treat every experience as data. Data is neutral, emotion is not. By reducing experiences to feedback, they remove emotional bias and operate from clarity. The process of training emotional neutrality requires deliberate practice. It begins with self-observation and expands through repetition. You learn by catching yourself in moments of reactivity and choosing restraint. You learn by taking pauses before acting, by questioning emotional impulses, by recentering through breath or routine. Each time you interrupt an emotional reaction, you strengthen the muscle of control. Emotional mastery isn't about never feeling, it's about never being owned by what you feel. The goal is not suppression but regulation, to use emotion as information rather than direction. Every decision made under emotional influence carries hidden distortion. You might be right by accident, but the pattern will fail over time. Emotional neutrality ensures longevity. It allows for consistency in action and predictability in results. It removes the emotional roller coaster that sabotages progress. The wealthy build lives that operate on principle, not passion, because principles remain steady while emotions fluctuate. By mastering emotion, they create freedom. Freedom from impulsive behavior, freedom from reactionary thinking, freedom from chaos masquerading as intensity. When you act without emotional interference, you begin to experience reality as it is, not as it feels. You respond with clarity instead of compulsion. You make choices aligned with purpose, not pressure. You move through uncertainty with steadiness rather than fear. This is where true power originates, not in controlling the world, but in mastering the inner state that engages with it. Focus on probabilities, not predictions. This principle is the dividing line between those who chase certainty and those who create consistent results. Most people are addicted to prediction. They want to know what will happen next before they act. They crave guarantees, absolute signals, and unshakable confidence before committing. This psychological dependency keeps them stuck in hesitation, analysis, and emotional volatility because the future never offers certainty, only possibility. The wealthy and highly successful understand this truth at a fundamental level. They know that the world operates on probabilities, not promises. Every decision carries a range of possible outcomes, each influenced by variables outside complete control. Their edge comes from mastering how to operate within that uncertainty, not by predicting what will happen, but by aligning with what is most probable and managing risk around it. Thinking in probabilities requires shifting from a linear mindset to a dynamic one. A linear thinker believes in cause and effect as something fixed. If I do this, then that will happen. A probabilistic thinker understands that while patterns exist, they don't guarantee outcomes. The same action can produce different results depending on timing, context, and randomness. This awareness doesn't create fear, it creates flexibility. The wealthy make decisions like statisticians and act like disciplined operators. They focus on stacking odds in their favor through preparation, data, and consistency. They know that no single decision determines their success. It's the cumulative effect of many small, high-probability decisions executed over time. When you focus on probabilities, you stop expecting to be right every time. The need to be right is an emotional burden that destroys objectivity. It makes you defensive, impatient, and blind to feedback. Probabilistic thinkers are comfortable being wrong because they don't equate wrong outcomes with failure. They see them as part of the statistical spread. Every outcome, win or loss, contributes to understanding probabilities better. This detachment from the need to predict perfectly allows them to remain calm, flexible, and consistent when others become reactive or paralyzed. They play the long game, knowing that short-term randomness doesn't change the integrity of a well-structured system. Operating from probability thinking also eliminates the illusion of control. Most people overestimate their ability to predict and control outcomes. They anchor on past successes and assume patterns will repeat exactly. This illusion leads to overconfidence and poor risk management. The wealthy build systems that assume uncertainty will always exist. They plan for variance instead of perfection. Every strategy they use is designed with buffers, contingencies, and flexibility. They don't rely on luck, they rely on structure. They accept randomness as part of the process and design their approach to absorb it without emotional or financial collapse. Probability thinking turns decision-making into a process of calibration rather than conviction. It's not about being sure, it's about being prepared. Each decision becomes a hypothesis tested against reality. You act, observe results, refine, and act again. This loop of constant adjustment keeps you aligned with changing circumstances. The wealthy thrive in dynamic environments because they don't freeze when things deviate from expectation. They anticipate deviation as normal. They never build a plan that depends on everything going right. Instead, they build systems that survive even when things go wrong. That resilience creates an aura of foresight, but it's really just preparation based on probability. One of the most powerful aspects of focusing on probabilities is that it neutralizes emotional extremes. When you think in predictions, every result feels personal. If you're right, you feel validated. If you're wrong, you feel humiliated. But when you operate in probabilities, results are simply data points. You stop judging yourself by outcomes and start measuring by process. That shift builds stability. Your emotions no longer swing with each result because you understand that one trade, one deal, one decision means almost nothing compared to the cumulative pattern. This perspective allows for patience, the rarest and most valuable psychological trait in high-stakes environments. Probability-based thinkers understand that randomness is not chaos, it's distribution. Over a large enough sample size, probabilities reveal consistency. That's why they focus on repetition, not perfection. They know that if they execute their process correctly, the probabilities will eventually work in their favor. Each decision, no matter how uncertain, becomes part of a broader statistical game. They don't obsess over the outcome of one instance. They care about the integrity of the system that produces outcomes over time. This is how they create stability in unpredictable environments, by trusting in the law of large numbers instead of the illusion of certainty. The mindset of probabilities also enhances adaptability. Predictive thinkers get attached to specific outcomes. When reality diverges from their expectations, they resist, deny, or overcorrect. Probabilistic thinkers, on the other hand, adapt instantly. They update their understanding as new information appears because they never assumed certainty to begin with. Their identity isn't tied to being right, it's tied to staying accurate. This constant recalibration keeps them aligned with reality instead of fantasy. They don't waste energy fighting the unexpected, they integrate it into their process. This is why they move faster, recover quicker, and capitalize sooner than others. When you operate from probabilities, risk becomes a tool instead of a threat. You stop avoiding risk and start managing it. Every decision involves exposure, but exposure becomes intelligent when measured against probability. The wealthy never eliminate risk, they control position size, diversify intelligently, and maintain balance between offense and defense. They never bet everything on one outcome no matter how confident they feel, because they understand that confidence doesn't change probability. Their goal is not to avoid loss, but to ensure no single loss can destroy them. This is how they maintain longevity while others burn out. Probability thinking also transforms how you interpret feedback. Predictive thinkers look for confirmation. They want to see evidence that supports their forecast. Probabilistic thinkers look for disconfirmation. They actively seek out information that challenges their assumptions because they know accuracy improves through contradiction, not validation. This scientific mindset keeps them humble and open-minded. They're not emotionally invested in being right. They're intellectually invested in refining their edge. That humility is what keeps them evolving while others stagnate inside their beliefs. To internalize probability thinking, you must redefine success. Success is not about being right most of the time. It's about managing the relationship between wins and losses. The wealthy think in terms of expected value, the average outcome of repeated actions. A small advantage, consistently applied, compounds exponentially over time. They focus on maximizing that edge rather than obsessing over perfection. They accept that losses are not failures but the cost of participation. Each loss is simply the downside of a probability distribution. This mindset keeps them emotionally neutral and strategically focused even through setbacks. Embracing probabilities also builds patience and timing. Predictive thinkers rush to act because they believe in perfect moments. Probabilistic thinkers understand that no moment is perfect, only advantageous. They wait for conditions where the odds tilt favorably, not where guarantees exist. This patience creates asymmetry, small risk, large reward. Their results look extraordinary not because they predict better, because they position better. They don't need to be right often, they only need to be right big when the probabilities align. Ultimately, focusing on probabilities aligns you with the actual mechanics of reality. Life markets and opportunities are complex systems ruled by uncertainty, randomness, and feedback loops. Those who demand prediction fight against reality. Those who embrace probability move with it. The wealthy operate with calm precision in chaos because they've accepted that nothing is ever certain. Their strength lies in preparation, adaptability, and discipline, not foresight. They don't try to know what will happen next. They prepare to respond effectively to whatever happens. By thinking in probabilities, they eliminate the need for perfection and replace it with the power of consistency.